All right, welcome back to Power Play, everyone. I'm Ryan Rice.
And I'm Erin Fair. Today, we are talking about a data story that started with a single library and is now reshaping how the oil field sees its past, present, and future.
Bryan McDowell is the founder and managing partner at Sabata Energy Consultants based in none other than Midland, Texas. He launched the company during the COVID-19 downturn right after being laid off.
And instead of waiting for the next opportunity, he created one. He bought his first oil and gas data library in 2020, and he hasn't looked back since.
Fast forward to today, Sabata now holds one of the largest private data collections in the industry, over 2 million digital files, as well as 4 million physical documents.
But it's not just about collecting information. Bryan's background as a reservoir engineer and geologist gives him a unique edge in turning those files into insights.
Bryan's worked in unconventional reservoirs since 2011, holds a geology degree from Texas A&M, master's degree in petroleum engineering from Colorado School of Mines, and is wrapping up his PhD in geology.
So yeah, he knows what he's doing. Bryan and his team specialize in integrating and visualizing data to help operators make smarter exploration and development decisions.
He's combining deep field knowledge with the power of this legacy data, unlocking the kind of insights that I think most companies could only dream of being able to have.
From a single library to a game-changing data powerhouse, this is the story of Bryan McDowell and Sabata Energy Consultants.
Well, let's dive right into it. Bryan, it's great to see you again, man. Great to have you on this call with us.
Appreciate the invite on the show.
Yeah, man. So I guess let's just kind of dive in it for our viewers, our audience members that are not familiar with Sabata. Could you guys just give me a quick elevator pitch, 30 seconds on what it is you guys do?
Yeah, so our kind of go-to slogan is find oil and gas faster. So long story short, geologic data is super hard to find, notoriously hard to find. It's been stranded over a whole bunch of different types of media over a very, very long time. So as the shale revolution kind of slows down a little bit, people are going back towards exploration. Again, what we're doing is we're going out and finding these old school data sets that are locked up either on paper or microfiche, or a lot of times even on tape reels, that are stuck out in warehouses, people's file rooms, storage units, somebody's garage, stuff like that. Essentially getting that stuff indexed, digitized, and scanned and kind of usable in kind of the 21st century, to be honest.
So doing what our industry does, but best, leveraging closology, maybe, with regards to finding new pay zones.
Yeah, a lot of it's just finding stuff that we've already been going after, to be honest. It's been the old saying is the best place to find oil is where you found oil before. And so that's, going back after this stuff that's 50, 60, 70 years old. You'd be amazed at how many wells I've seen, or old scout tickets where a well was abandoned because it only made 200 barrels a day in 1940 something, right? That's you can definitely make money off of that these days. So yeah. It's interesting.
I know in the Permian, there's been a lot of chatter around kind of the Deep Woodford, kind of on the Delaware side, a little bit on the Central Basin platform. So definitely hearing a lot of things around, the drill deeper horizons. I'm just curious, have you seen a lot, across the industry with regards to maybe some shallower, uphole, semi-conventional things that, were glossed over in the days when we were going after the Wolf Camp and Bone Spring and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. I think honestly what I've been really seeing is what I've been kind of telling folks is that, the shale party's not over, but we floated the first keg, and we got to start thinking about where the after party is. Some of that's going to be more M&A, although at this point, you're going after bigger targets, more expensive targets, overpriced targets, tough stuff to make things work. So I think what you're seeing is the business is kind of re-specializing. We've spent the last 10 or 15 years really hyper-specializing in shales and really getting to that kind of coring up more and more acreage-wise. And now what you're seeing is people either doing the kind of exploitation, right, going to higher or lower intervals in the yellow, so where you already have acreage, or going out to the edges of the basins and stuff too. So yeah, we're seeing stuff all over the place. It's everything from just kind of tight conventionals to we're doing a lot of lithium work actually, right? Like a lot of lithium work right now. More
Interesting.
geothermal. Yeah, we're seeing more CCUS
Wow.
stuff pop back up. Not a huge amount, but there's, it's definitely interesting. The business has definitely changed over the last couple of years for sure, and really over the last year.
So, this almost like there's some tailwinds going for you guys in the energy transition sense with everything that we're hearing about, lithium brine extraction, some of this geothermal stuff, companies like Fervo are doing, but
Hmm.
able to leverage the existing well logs and the data, from those, vertical wells drilled in the 30s, 40s, 50s to be able to potentially unlock new resource types, whether it's lithium, geothermal, things of that nature.
Yeah, that's one thing you got to realize is that like in the U.S. We've drilled more wells in the U.S. I think than the rest of the world combined. I mean, the
Hmm.
amount of data that there is in the U.S. and really if you put Canada in there, you can really make that claim very very easily. The amount of data that's already exists in the U.S. and how close, like kind of how good the coverage is, allows us to do a lot of this kind of non-traditional subsurface energies, just because there's so much data already out there that you can get for free or near free. And what we've been really focusing on is, the last few years, used to, pre 2015, maybe even up to 2017, 2018, you go to like RBC Richardson Bar and see all the oil and gas companies that are out there. This list was like this long. Well, now that list has gotten much, much shorter. And so a lot of the data companies are really focusing on those really big players. What we're doing is kind of going the opposite way and focusing on the one-man shops up to the big players, right? Because essentially, as you get down to it, there's a million of these small shops that are doing all sorts of stuff. I've got, in the last month, we've been selling stuff, lithium stuff in Arkansas. We've been taking samples for the San Andreas, like old, 100-year-old reservoirs in the Permian Basin. I'm actually flying to Montana in 2 weeks to go take pictures of log headers up there for new exploration. Right? I mean, it's all over the place, to be honest. Actually, well, we've got some. I can't say too much right now, but we're working on some other stuff down in the like farther east on the Gulf Coast as well too. That makes some really interesting acquisitions. So, yeah, it's a cool time to be a data hound.
So, like in my Neanderthal brain, I kind of envision, like, tell me how wrong this is, but I kind of envision like almost like a episode from Storage Wars, where you're breaking into these warehouses, bunch of
Yeah.
paper log files, sifting through what you can, and then having to digitize all of that data. Is that right?
Yeah, you're not wrong. That honestly is I usually tell people is I'm a hot shot with a ton of student debt. Honestly, because all I do is I'm in last year we moved. I think I figured we moved 100 tons of paper and rock last year by hand. That means not, and I'm not just talking about like it's already packed and we just go put it on a shelf. I mean, taking off the shelf, put it in the boxes, load it on a truck, take it to our storage units, move it back into the office, index it and everything. If we got a couple big acquisitions on the table now, if we get a couple of them are big rock collections, we're really starting to get into rock more. And if we get those, I mean, that'll be close to 500,000 pounds of rock, I think, that we'd be moving for the end of
Whoa.
the year, maybe more.
So I always see your posts on LinkedIn and you've got these like truckloads full of things. You're
Yeah,
like, we moved a bunch. Is that what you're talking about? That you just go
yeah.
pick up these and then you take them to your office? And when you say digitize them, so I know that like I'm helping my family like digitize old photos and stuff, but with the data,
Mhm.
like how are you digitizing the rocks? How are you like what's your process for
So
everything?
the rocks were so for the rocks we're not really digitizing, we're mostly just indexing and getting onto a map, which
Oh,
is
okay.
it's pretty straightforward. It's not that hard. The hard part is kind of monetizing it. But the paper is a totally different story. We're the rocks. I think we own. I don't know. I think 15 miles of core and like 8,000 boxes of cuttings, which is a
Oh
lot.
my
Don't get me wrong.
gosh.
But in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that much. On the other hand, I own a million paper well logs, another 2 to 3 million on microfiche, and I don't know, 3 million completion cards, like index cards. And then we just scanned another 700,000 pages of scout tickets. So, we
Wow.
average about a minute a document, right? So if you add all that up, that's what, you probably got 5 to 10 million minutes of work. I mean, that's the tough part.
Yeah.
Doing anything 10,000 times is pretty easy. We do that in about 3 days internally.
Wow.
So, yeah. So going back to your question though, as far as like the photos and stuff, it's kind of similar. So rather than going and like get a box of well logs, like a banker's box holds about 100 well logs more or less. Okay. Rather, if I was to scan all of that up front, that would take me about, on average, 7 to 10 minutes per log, right? So you got 700. Is that right? Yeah, 700 to 1,000 minutes per box. Well, we moved 5,000 boxes last year, right? So it's not, in order to do that, not only is it very expensive, very slow, it's also expensive, mainly from a manpower standpoint. So what we do instead, rather than scan it all up front, is we just index it, which essentially we call them tagging bags. Put a sticker on it, take a photograph of the header, get that kind of information off of it, because that's really all you need to put it on a map. 90% of this stuff will never sell. People don't care about it, or they already have it, or it's like a cement bond log in Hudspeth County, Texas. No one's ever going to order that, right? And so we index everything first, and then we scan, which is like what you do with the family photos. And then after that, we can digitize it to get it to tabular data and stuff too. So it's a moving target. It's very much kind of minimal viable product, to be honest. That's where we really differ than a lot of the bigger shops, is rather than charging $1 million a year to have everything on demand instantaneously, we're charging maybe a quarter of that or whatever. But you're going to have a quarter of that ready to rock and roll, and the rest of it is kind of as you need it. So it's a little different business model, but in these days where everyone's trying to keep costs down, people want more unique data, especially for all the AI stuff that's going out there, right? You need more unique data, and your budgets are a lot tighter than they were 10 years ago. That's where we're kind of trying to fit in that niche, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. So
Yeah.
on one hand, it sounds like, data as a service. You guys have collected this library.
Yeah, 100%.
A lot of people might need it. They can either go get it themselves. No one really wants to do that in today's day and age, so they call you, gets the access to that data. And on the other hand, you guys, sounds like you're doing some services along the way, whether it's preparing that data, interpreting the well logs. How much kind of service type work are you guys doing, like in a traditional geologist sense of mapping out horizons, things of that nature?
Well, early on, the first couple of years of the business, we were doing mostly consulting just to keep the lights on, because the data's, full disclosure, right? Data's got pretty good margins, but you spend years and millions of dollars building it out before you ever even break even. And
Right.
so we used the consulting early on to kind of keep the lights on. That's when I was doing more technical work, not as much mapping, but a lot of like data visualization, like Spotfire. I do a lot of Spotfire stuff, and we partner. Obviously, known y'all through a lot of the Saga Wisdom guys. Shout out to them. And then essentially just building dashboards, visualizing data, that sort of thing. Really, last year the data started overtaking the consulting, to where now we're spending most of our time and definitely making most of our money on the data sales part of it, kind of going forward. So we haven't been doing really as much technical work other than the data visualization side, I'd say probably for the last 2 years, although that is definitely changing right now. As we're getting this stuff in, we've kind of got a really good baseline of the data set that we want. And so now it's kind of going in and refining it, i.e. like someone calls me and say, hey, I want like drilling mud densities is a big thing that we're pushing out right now. Like, well, which ones are in the wolf camp? Well, I don't know. You give me your tops, I can tell you, but without your tops, I don't really know. And so now what we're starting to do is actually go in there and actually flag those different things, right? Not necessarily selling the maps or selling the tops. Most geologists don't want to pay for that anyways. Is essentially just giving extra context or extra enrichment to what we've already got, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So I guess maybe taking a step back, you launched Sabata during the downturn, right?
Yeah.
What kind of gave you the guts to double down when I think most people were taking their foot off the gas
Honestly,
pedal?
just being naive.
Same. Same.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. So I was a technical advisor for an operator out in Midland. We did some really great technical work with a couple of the other team members that I worked with. Actually, one of my old bosses actually helps me out part time now, which is kind of cool.
Aw.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's always a good feeling, right? When your boss, years later is like, well, I wasn't a total idiot if they still want to keep working for me or with me. But honestly, I didn't have anything going on. Most busts take 2 years to recover, and I mean, on the average. And I was like, well, it's like I needed to finish my PhD up, but I couldn't get on campus because of all the COVID stuff. So I took a leave of absence. I was like, well, I'm not just going to sit here and do nothing. And so I started doing consulting stuff, and then I heard about this library going for sale in Midland. I was living in San Angelo at the time. And honestly, I called a buddy up and was like, hey, I don't know if we'll ever make money on this thing, but it's a pretty substantial library. I was like, worst case scenario, that doesn't work out, and we'll be one of the biggest data owners in the Permian, and we can go drill wells on this for the rest of our life, which frankly is still the backup plan to this day, honestly. I mean, truly, it's like, who knows? It's still a 50-50 whether we're actually going to make our money back on this deal or not. So, and it just kind of grew from there. I'd already been doing a bunch of kind of data stuff in my PhD, just kind of organizing and compiling old geologic publications. There's a lot of really good old geology work. The problem is it is a dog's breakfast of putting it together. It's just all over the place. I'm a geologist. I love geologists. We are not particularly good at organization, especially when it comes to data. And so I spent the better part of, honestly, 10 years just coming up with a scheme to try to make sense of this all. Well, then when we got this library, it essentially just sent that to, we just had to scale that, 100x or 1,000x overnight, right? And that's really what kind of put everything into gear. So I already been kind of chomping on this or chewing on this stuff a little bit, but, it's just kind of grown from there, to be honest. And that's really where we're at, is that, ultimately what I'd like to do is, rather than just sell data, is kind of the old school seismic models where you could go offshore. Seismic shoot might cost $10 million or something like that. Say, hey, I don't have the money for that. It's like, okay, well, how about I'll give you the data for free if you let me take a small equity stake in the project. And that's ultimately what the end goal for Sabata is, whether that's, next year or 10 years down the road. Because data, at the end of the day, geologic data is the fundamental unit. Before there's production, there's well logs, right? And so that's really where we're kind of going after. So I don't know if that helps, if that answers your question.
Bringing the old school back, man. I think that's how every basin that came to be, the geologist had a twinkle in his eye, got a nice little override, and here we are now.
Yeah, and honestly, looking back, man, it was, I don't know, it was a while. I'm glad we did it, but, about every 3 days, I wonder why I did it. So sorry, Karen.
No, you're fine. I just had a question. So I love hunting for crystals. I'm like a little rock hounder at heart. Okay. I love looking for rocks. And I think every kid at some point goes through the rock phase where got to get all the rocks. What got you interested in geology from the get-go?
I guess kind of the same thing. I'll be honest, I never really got into crystals or anything like that, like a lot of geos, gems and stuff. I still to this day. I mean, they're cool, but I don't really go out of my way for them. I like fossils.
Really?
I've always liked fossils. It's like I grew up on a creek out in the middle of nowhere, and so I'd pick up petrified wood and stuff all the time. And then my dad worked in the oil field. He worked in cement tools, build centralizers and stuff. He worked for one of the big shops, or he worked for Antelope Oil Tool, which is a subsidiary of Frank's out of Lafayette. It's a huge casing company. So I don't know. My dad, I honestly didn't even plan to go to college. I was going to try to do music for a living, and my dad forced me to go to college, and here I am 15 years later.
Here you are getting a PhD in geology.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, what's your dissertation on?
It's I should say rebuilding. It's trying to integrate or trying to improve the chronostratigraphic framework for the Upper Mancos and the Mesa Verde group in the Piceance basins. Long story short, trying to make better sense of all the sandstones and how these things are distributed and how they move over time, and the Upper Cretaceous out in western Colorado and eastern Utah.
I'm from Utah. I'm in Salt Lake City. So yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, it was kind of, I don't know, it was an interesting project. It was mostly, I was supposed to go in this mostly for tight gas sands, but I started grad school in, I don't even want to say it, but like in 2011. By 2011, no one was drilling gas wells anymore, really. By 2012 or 2013, no one really was. And so, like, it's kind of funny with all this, like, Uinta Basin stuff picking up, and you're seeing some wildcatting out there for, like, a Niobrara. I was joking with a buddy of mine who was in the same research group, like, at, was this 14 years in, my PhD is actually relevant for the first time in my career. No one has given a crap about my research for a very long time.
But
And like
here
now
we
I got people
are.
calling me like, what about this formation? What about that? I was like, oh yeah, I got those correlations, blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of, I was like, oh, this is what it felt like to be a cool kid, working on the Niobrara in 2011. When I was out here screwing around in sandstone. So it's kind of, it's interesting.
Hey, what's old is new. That's
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
said.
So the point of this entire conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's been a lot of interest picking up, maybe like specifically in the San Juan around like the Makos, what they're doing over there. But hearing a lot of chatter
Yeah.
up in the Powder River now with the Niobrara
Yeah.
stuff. I think Continental has been doing a lot of stuff up there. But yeah, looking through.
Actually, it's funny, and I think I've told you this story before, Ryan, is go full circle on this, right? So, my PhD was really started as a master's in the peons, was working with tight gas sands. No one cared about that. So I worked new ventures for a decent-sized operator out of Denver, and we were doing some analog stuff down, and I can't say too much. But anyways, I was working in Utica, and this was like 2015,
Hey.
2016. Yeah, exactly. And so I was working on all this Utica stuff, and by that point, it was really Chesapeake had their stuff up north, and there was this new outfit called Rice Energy doing some stuff down south, right? And my bosses were kind of like, "Is this, like, what are these guys doing?" I was like, "I don't know." So, anyways, I started working out there, and then that was when the Bigfoot wells came online, and I remember going to my bosses and essentially showing them like, "Look, this is the real deal. Like, these are monster gas wells." And the CEO is all upper management is mostly geophysicists. They're super skeptical about anything. They're like, well, I don't really know. I don't. That doesn't seem real. I think it's a 24-hour test. I was like, I don't think so, because Ohio is really weird, right? Was it monthly data, but they only released every 3 months,
Right, quarterly.
and I was like, there's no this is the real deal. And I just remember watching these wells for 6-9 months where they just didn't decline.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, this has got to be fake. I was like, dude, this is the real deal. And then the Sportsman, was it Range's Sportsman well came on in
Yes.
Southwest PA at 60 million a day. And that was when we knew for sure, or when I knew for sure, like this play is going to be enormous. And then Consol's big well, and anyways, it's really
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah, and
EQT
so
had that Scott's Run.
yep,
That came
exactly.
on. That was a 24-hour rate. Yeah, talking with the field out there. That thing was a 3,000-foot lateral. Hit 120 million a day.
And you know what's interesting about all this too? One, the range thing, I got to tell you the story because I think people would appreciate it. So
Yes.
working new ventures, right, you never have enough data, right? Well, the data set that we essentially had no data from kind of southeastern Ohio through like Maryland. There was almost no triple combos out there. And Range Resources was trying to brag about that Sportsman Run well so much, they actually published the triple combo in their PowerPoint. To show investors. Now they took off the depths, and they took off the units, but it didn't matter because we know exactly what those units are. So I went out there and I grabbed that power as soon as I was on the call, or just listened to the call, right? Grabbed that PowerPoint as soon as it got released before they took it down, sent it to the geotech to digitize it, threw it back in the Petra project. We had it in the Petra project in an hour, and that was our first triple combo we had within like 20 miles. And that really kind of put the nail in the coffin. Like, this thing is huge, right? And then like you said, the EQT and the Consol wells and all those other ones, right, just really kind of blew it up. But anyways, we didn't end up, like I said, it was an analog play for this other stuff that they were drilling. Then they never really went back to it, although they made an acquisition a few years ago that's kind of out there now. But what's interesting is after that, I got recycled back to the Rockies working Niobrara. And I was like, man, it's like, you know where you ought to go look is the Pions. Like, there's this Niobrara out there, and WPX drilled a well that sounded very, very similar to that EQT well, where they only drilled a couple thousand feet because they couldn't keep the wellbore open, and it blew back like millions of cubic feet a day. And anyways, I still think that's one of the greatest. That's the closest shale play I've seen personally or most similar to the Utica I've seen in the U.S. And I still hope that someone goes out there and drills it now with all this UN activity picking up. But anyways, I think I've told you this before. Sorry, that's a long story. But
No.
just kind of like full circle, that was me starting in 2011, working the EQT or the Rice stuff, started with y'all stuff back in 2015, and then was back in the Pions and did this is pretty much the same thing in 2017. And now here we are in 2025, and people are going back after it. Again, 10 years later after I started grad school. It's kind of kind of nice.
I mean, EOG just took out Encino on the Western Utica, more liquids-rich play. It's funny to hear you say that because I am not a geologist, and so I was just like, I'll say intelligently guessing. I don't even know if it was that intelligent, but back in the day, I was using actually the Eagleford as kind of like my analog for the Utica. How repulsed are you by that statement?
I mean, we did too. Actually, that's what my closest analog was too.
So it wasn't the dumbest thing you've ever heard.
No, the only thing that's different is up there because those reservoirs are older. It's really, and this is going to be super down the weeds, but I learned this from my boss, is that the organic material, the algae that create essentially crack to oil and gas in the Utica are pre-Devonian, right? Mm-hmm. Anyways, long story short, they're on a totally different evolutionary thing than whatever the algae that you see in the Eagleford and the Niobrara and all that, which is mostly Cretaceous. Long story short, essentially the way those things work is as like immature oil, gas, like immediately. Like it really converts really quickly to gas, which is I think why down there, there were some updip wells that Anadarko did way back in like 2013 or something like that that really didn't do too much. Then you get just a couple miles, all of a sudden, boom, this thing pops. And I think that was the one thing that I was like, man, this thermal maturity window is really narrow. Then like, well, if you look at the Eagleford, it's not that much wider. If you kind of look at the algal part of this, it definitely makes sense too. I don't know. That's been 10 years ago now, so sorry if there's any thermal maturity people on here that are probably cringing right now.
Probably. We're probably offending someone.
No, I mean, honestly, that was our closest thing too. I mean, you got to realize there wasn't a whole lot this was like, when did y'all drill the Bigfoot? Was that 2016, 2015?
We drilled 2013, it turned in line on 14.
14, okay. All right, so I was off a little bit. I think I started looking at 15 then. Okay. So, but at the time, it was still mostly gas plays at that point. There really wasn't, other than the Bakken, but the Bakken's a totally different.
Everyone thought we were crazy with doing Belmont because Chesapeake was, up in Carroll County, chasing the liquids, and we were considered heretics for going down Belmont.
And I remember when Aubrey McClendon went out there and said that the Utica was going to be the greatest thing for Ohio since the plow. That is still one of the greatest lines I've ever heard in oil and gas. And here we are, the third iteration, right? I mean, you had the Chesapeake trend. You had y'all's trend y'all kicked off down south. It's obviously still going strong. Now UG's going back up to the up-dip stuff, which always looked really interesting. It just didn't have a whole lot of pressure, and they were cracking the code on that, obviously. So, yeah, it's really interesting to kind of see it all. I guess this is on one upside of being not an old guy, but a getting older guy.
Dude, we're old now. We're super old in the industry. We've been through, 3 or 4 busts now. And
I've been through. My career's been pretty much only bust. To be honest, my usual joke is when I'm getting ready to ramp up, that's when prices are going to fall. That's
the top signal right there.
Hey, I'm always I've been out of sync my entire career, so it's good. It makes you scrappy,
I have a question about the future, since we're all about innovation here on Power Play, and so with ResNet, we are really looking for how can we be using AI, within our own platform. And you've talked about, you've taken all of these paper files, you've digitized them all, you've got this big library. Where do you see it going in the future, especially now that AI has entered the chat?
Yeah, so full disclosure, we don't do a whole lot of like deep data sciencey stuff in house. What I usually tell people is that think of most data companies as like a restaurant. You go there, you got a set menu, you can make some modifications here and there, but for the most part, you know what you're going to get. We're more like a butcher, right? So essentially, you come to me, you tell me what you want. If we've got it in the back, we'll carve it up. If not, we'll procure it, right? That's kind of what we do. But that being said, what I see, part of the reason we've stayed out of this, one, is just not my area of expertise. And number two, what I'm seeing, at least with our clients and a lot of the other operators and stuff, is that you've got a handful of commercial solutions, AI solutions, that are getting ran on a handful of commercial data sets. The vast majority of operators do not own enough data to really make any sort of difference in a data model other than very hyper locally, right? And honestly, a lot of times it adds more noise than it actually solves. That's just, it's just essentially kind of, do you have enough to kind of pull it over the line or whatever? Where I see, or just based off of that, let's say you got 3 big commercial solutions, 3 big commercial data sets, 3 times 3 is 9. You have 9 unique models, right? Essentially 9 unique combinations. You can sprinkle a little extra here and there. But it kind of gets down to, I think, maybe this is a terrible analogy, but I feel like a lot of this is people spend a lot of time and money to get just a few seconds ahead of their competitors, right? Kind of like, think of it as like NASCAR or F1, right? The more hyper-competitive it gets, the narrower the band of winning really gets. And so what I've been trying to focus on is focus on getting unique data sets that are big enough and unique enough and have enough coverage both vertically, stratigraphically, so up, down, and side to side aerially, that you can really move the needle if you put it in there. Now, that's a bit of a pie in the sky thing, but part of that is we've spent the first 3 years of the company just building essentially a phone book listing of all the data that's available. And so what we do is we focus on everything that we don't know it's out there already, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't have as big of inventory as some of the the huge companies, but the inventory I do have typically is more unique, if that makes sense. And I think that's really where the value in this is going to be going forward, is either getting more unique data sets in your existing models, or obviously making your own models or own unique models and not just slight modifications. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah.
That's the way I think about it.
So like, I'm wondering, Bryan, like, with how much data you guys have, and from everything that you've seen, what's either like the most unique or like the weirdest, most insightful piece of data or insight that you've gleaned, from these ancient files?
I think the two that we're really spending a lot of time and money on, one is drilling mud densities.
Okay.
It's super simple. Essentially, it's a reactive thing. Essentially, if I'm drilling in a formation that has high formation pressure, I drill with higher mud densities not to take kicks. That stuff's been out there forever. It's on every single well log. There's, probably 5 million well logs in the U.S., something like that. As far as I know, no one has actually ever commercialized that as a data set. And what's really interesting is that if you drill with low mud densities, it doesn't mean that there's not high formation pressure. But if you drill with high mud densities, there's high formation pressure, right? It's kind of hysteresis isn't the right word, but it's kind of path dependent on it. But anyways, just because it's so expensive, that's something that's been around for a very, very long time that actually predates well logs, right? Well logs only go back to 1927, 21, something like that with Schlumberger. You've got drilling mud density goes way back older than that. And what we're doing is building these like kind of pseudo pressure maps that I don't think is really weird. It's out there. It's just something that no one's ever really thought about. We're actually going to be putting a big LinkedIn post tomorrow showing a lot of that stuff.
Oh, cool, man.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, we're pretty excited. We started on it about a year ago, and now we've pulled 360-something thousand data points by hand in the last year.
Wow. Now, is that
it's
across the lower 48? Is that, just within the Permian? some of
Uh,
the Colorado Uinta stuff you've been doing?
so it's a little pretty much everything except Appalachia. Uh,
Got it.
so it's essentially Gulf Coast through the Permian, through most of the Mid-Con, and all the way up the Rockies. And then right now I'm actually scraping all of North Dakota right now. I had to stop my scraper so the video would be good on this. So like I think I've scraped something like 300,000 well logs in the last 2 weeks from North Dakota, and I just got another 70,000 log headers in Texas over the weekend.
There we go.
So that'll be hitting the airwaves here pretty soon too. And then plus Montana. I'm actually going to Montana specifically for mud densities. I'm literally flying to Billings for 5 days. So
nice.
that's a one that's been around. I think it's really unique. There's just no one's really paid attention to. I think one of the other ones too is we're going after drill stem tests. Historically, that's conventional stuff.
Yep.
That's not really super useful in shale. But the two things that you get off a drill stem test is you get an idea of pressure, right? That's always good. Pressure is good. We need pressure, Darcy's equation. And then the other one is fluid types, right? Is it heavy oil versus light oil? Is it gas? Is it just straight water, right? Which we don't want.
You spent a lot of time looking at DSTs, drill stem tests.
A lot more than I ever have before, that's for sure. It's kind of tough to learn because there's not a whole lot of people that know how to read those things anymore.
No, I mean that goes back to like the 50s, 60s,
Oh, yeah.
traditional core conventional reservoir engineering. We haven't had to do any of that in the unconventional world. So to your point, this resurgence of what we'll call like the conventional, semi-conventional, world should be interesting. See what happens.
Yeah, I think what I see the business kind of splitting exploration wise is you've got companies going two ways. You got one way that's going towards kind of more kind of the machine learning AI route. Those are mostly bigger companies. One, because of just scale, right? It's very hard to scale very detail oriented stuff, right? And also the scale of what you have to drill to move the needle.
Right.
Then the other side is you have people going after the old school paper data or stuff that used to be on paper. But those are usually much smaller groups where you're finding deep subject matter experts that are finding stuff. The difference is finding like a 20 well horizontal play versus the next wolf camp, right? There's probably another wolf camp out there somewhere or something, maybe not that big, but half that big or something like that. There's a lot of these 20 to 50 well plays, right? It's the $10 to $100 million gap, right? Too big for family money, too small for the big shops. I think that's really where we're going to see a lot of the business in the next few years.
Do you guys get any international stuff? Because I know that's been some of the chatter with Continental and Sheffield out in the Beetaloo Basin.
Not yet, but we are moving that direction. So what I see is that with all the U.S. stuff, what we're really doing with a lot of these is we're getting rules of thumb for like temperature, pressures, thicknesses, blah, blah, blah. Not just kind of like what you see in SPE, but actually putting hundreds of thousands or millions of data points behind it to really show that this is the real deal and when this is appropriate and when it's not. Part of that's obviously selling data in the state side. Obviously, that's where we make our money. However, I think the big opportunity is taking those rules of thumb and taking that understanding and exporting it out. Frac spreads are down, drone rigs are down, right? It's tougher to do business in the U.S. politically, both politically and just, people just don't, the NIMBY's not my backyard, right? And I think you're going to start seeing a lot of that technology, that understanding, and a lot of that workforce is going to have to go overseas. I just don't see any other way, to be honest.
Almost that. I'd be really curious to get your insight. What would you say is like a rule of thumb that maybe we haven't gotten it flat out wrong, but like maybe it just kind of gives you a lot of discomfort or anxiety, or maybe we have gotten it flat out wrong? Anything come to mind as far as like what those rules of thumbs are that maybe you would challenge?
Rules of thumb for like exploration or
doing analogs, right? Like if we see this, then we might expect the well to come online at X or Y, or everyone's back of the envelope math on EURs and things like that.
I can tell you from an exploration standpoint, I've been putting these out in LinkedIn, which I get in a lot of arguments, a lot of old guys over this, but regardless, it still works. Is that we're going through these old public well logs. And there are very, very few plays, at least in the Mid-Con, Gulf Coast, Permian, and Rockies, resource plays, not conventional, but resource plays, shale plays, tight, whatever, that produces at less than 175 degrees Fahrenheit and less than, say, 9 to 10 pounds per gallon muds. Okay, so essentially anything colder than that or lower pressure than that, is there stuff in there? Yeah, for sure. But it's not like the big boy Wolf Camp, Bone Spring, the deep Uinta stuff everyone's chasing now. Above 175 degrees Fahrenheit and above 10 pounds per gallon. That is the thing that we're looking at when we go through our mud logs every day, or through our well logs every day. I think there's no reason why that would work in the U.S. and not work elsewhere in the world.
Right, with as many shale plays as we've discovered, exploited.
Yeah, exactly.
SAT question for you. I know you know the answer to this. Why are there not mud weights in Appalachia?
Because it drill there.
There we
A
go.
lot of times. Yeah.
Nice.
Is that the only place in the country we do that, like at scale? I've always wondered.
No, you'll see it you will see it in the Rockies a little bit too. Mostly because Appalachia, and I haven't worked the Appalachia Basin in super deep detail in a long time, but because Appalachian Basin is so dry, it's been cooked so much. That's why you have so much gas. That I think a lot of that water's just been driven off, or it's just been consumed by the petroleum system or something or another. Some of it, I definitely think it's just been driven off as well too. And there's been a couple uplifting events, but you do see air. You see it occasionally in. I was trying to think where I have been seeing it more. I've been seeing it more, I think maybe in Oklahoma. I don't know.
Really?
I work like 5 basins a day, so it all kind of runs together.
Kind of meshes together for you.
Yeah, but you definitely see it in the Rockies some for sure. Coal, actually, you do see it in coal a lot of times as well too.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that was probably a lot of the tech debt or reason as to why we did that in Appalachia when we did it. It was just still that's the way we've always done it, right?
Yeah, and if it works, it works. It's a lot cheaper too. I mean, I think Kentucky they do a lot of air drilling in Kentucky as well too. I mean, if you don't have to pump mud in the hole, then why do it? Or a lot of times it's native mud, right, where you just pump a little water and just use whatever cuttings are coming out, right? I mean, oil-based mud is not cheap, I mean, it's diesel, right? With additives, right? If you don't have to use it, you don't want to use it.
So I'm curious, you talked about this after party that's happening. Where do you see the energy industry going with this after party situation?
I think there's still a couple big M&As left. I think it's going to, with prices the way they are right now, I think everyone's going to put a pause until probably later this year or early next year. But, you can't merge and acquire forever. The deals now are getting so big. I think it's going to be the big boys start going overseas, which we're already seeing, EOG, Continental, we're hearing about Australia pick up more too. I keep thinking about Argentina. We got a different government down there, although I don't follow as much, but, at least you would think is a little better government than we had 10 years ago. I keep hearing whispers about like Algeria and Libya as well too.
Wow.
So I think for the big boys, I think that's what you're going to have to do, because like I said, at some point there's no one left to buy, right? And I think for everyone that's getting spun out, the general rule is you merge 2 companies, you drop 2 rigs and 2 rigs and 2 frac spreads, right? And then you lay off, probably 10 to 20% of that workforce that you acquired, or you just naturally let them leave over the next couple years, and over the next year. We're seeing that a lot in the Permian. All those folks are either starting up their own thing, or they're not finding jobs and leaving the business. And I think with everyone starting up their new thing, it's you can't go chase. Yeah, you have to have $100 million to get started in the Permian now, in the deep basin. And so I think what you're going to see is people chasing like small areas, very focused targets, stuff like that going forward. So I think you're going to have a whole bunch of like 10 to 100 person companies, and a whole lot a couple dozen 2 to 3,000 companies and higher, and then not a whole lot in between, because that in between is really, really tough, where you're not big enough to really buy into a lot of these big prospects, but you're too big to really make your, be able to keep the lights on off of 20 or 50 well fields,
Right.
I don't
So
know.
Brian, is that a resurgence of the mom and pops?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a little bit. What's really interesting, though, is there's not a whole lot of people in the business that have ever done exploration anymore.
We've
Most of the
forgotten how
people
to
that
do
have
it.
what's that?
We've forgotten how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much a lot of the people that have done exploration are either dead or retired. Not all of them, but a lot of them, most of
Oh,
them.
wow.
And
I
I
didn't
would
realize
say,
that.
yeah, I'm 36, turning 37. I did a little exploration, mostly because, when I was in grad school and working part time, and I've done it on my own on the side as well too.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say the vast majority of people my age, a little bit older and a little bit younger, have mostly just drilled out inventory, and and they've drilled out inventory on tops and prospects that were built years ahead of them. Not everybody, but a lot of people have, right?
Oh yeah.
And drilling out, just drilling out 100 wells or 200 or 500 wells a year is not the same as standing something up from scratch.
No, it's
not
totally
even
different.
Yeah, and it's the risk component of it is totally different too. As an industry, I think we've really lost our nerve when it comes to exploration. I mean, honestly, because we've been spoiled on the last 10 or 15 years of shale. We might not have always gotten rich on stuff, and there's been plenty of us that have lost a lot of money on it, myself included. But at the same time, for the most part, you always broke even, more or less, right? Now we're going back in exploration, where the rule of thumb is that you lose 90% of the time, and that's if you're the best in the world, right?
Wow.
I think we're about to have a real reckoning in the industry. I don't call me Chicken Little, but
Oh, I couldn't agree
Reckoning.
more with you, man. I think last 10 years it's been a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, right? Where we've lit a lot of money on fire. Some companies have, some other companies have done quite well for themselves. But now the market has forced us, right, to drill repeatable, reliable,
yeah,
returns for their shareholders, and that has come at the cost of some of the risk taking that this industry was built on in the form of exploration. And so we've given up those skill sets in the name of providing repeatable returns for our shareholders. And to your point, it feels like over the last 10 years we've just lost some of that magic, right?
yeah. The way I think about this, and it's super simplistic, but think of it as like you got three legs of the stool. Is, do you have the skill set? Do you have the money to do it? And do you have the ability to take the risk, take the heat?
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few companies that have all three. There's lots of companies that are willing to take the risk and might have the skill set, but they have a hard time getting the money. Right. There's companies that have the money and the risk tolerance, but they don't have the skill set to do it. Right. I mean, there's really only I would say really a handful that I know of personally that really have all three. And it's really what it's going to take now. And then you add the price volatility on top of that. Right now is actually the best time to do exploration because everyone's sitting around, no one's drilling really that much. It's wild. I drove back from Houston to Midland last night. I got in like midnight, and it is amazing the lack of drilling rigs I saw between San Angelo and Midland last night. It was wild. I mean, I knew rig count was down, but I did not realize it was down that much. I mean, I'd see 2, 3, 4 dozen rigs, or really at least 1 or 2 dozen, even within the last year. And I think I saw maybe 2 or 3 outside of city limits
Right.
before I saw,
Wow.
Midland city limits last
Dude, I
night.
think we can count on 2 hands how many active rigs out there right now, even doing anything remotely exploration, right? Like,
Oh yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, you hear, you hear through the grapevine, obviously a lot of stuff, and then you see some of the publications. But I probably only know of two or three real, like wildcatting stuff going on right now. The Cherokee was the hot big thing last year, and you can see as soon as word got about that, everyone's piling in, right? I think because everyone's so desperate, we have to replace inventory, right? And if you can't buy it, that means you gotta. If you can't buy it buy someone out, I think the sell point and the buy points are so far apart now on so much stuff that you're either buying stuff just to keep inventory up and keep your stock price up, or you're just kind of sitting and holding. I don't know. It's a weird situation, that's for sure. I'm by no means the expert on it, but I just hear a lot of whispers or hear clients and stuff too. So yeah, I don't know.
Well,
Before,
this has been
last question, Aaron, I swear.
last question. No, this is great.
What advice would you have for some of those out there that might be facing, the current extent of the downturn, thinking like, hey, I'm going to go start my own oil and gas company? What advice would you have for them generally? And then my second question would be, with regards to, geo tools, solutions that you might be using in your day-to-day, any specific like new hot tech that you love, maybe on the same tier as Spotfire, that people should be looking out for?
As far as hot tech, there's a bunch of new AI tools coming out there. I think a lot, some of it's definitely overhyped, but there's some really good tools like here and there, just like going after, I don't do super deep data sciencey stuff, but even just like I guess vibe coding or whatever like that. Like, dude, it is so easy now to scrape data versus even just 2 or 3 years ago, just because of ChatGPT and some of those tools.
Oh yeah,
dude.
dude.
It's amazing. I think that's why you're seeing such high competition, like the well data space. But even some stuff that, and then like character recognition, a lot of geology stuff is we're just searching for keywords, honestly. Like, that's really one of the hardest things our jobs is just finding text that matches what we're looking for. So, as far as like really big up and coming tools, I think for me, we're honestly kind of, I want to sound like a Luddite here, but honestly, we're just going back to the basics, going back to the fundamentals. Because
ChatGPT scraping down all the data you can get your hands on.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of the stuff that we do by hand too, instead of using AI models. I know a lot of my competitors snicker at me all the time, but honestly, when you're curating data sets for like what we do, right? Like, again, we're just butchers, right? Doing stuff by hand is usually cheaper, faster, and more accurate, especially if you do it less than 10,000 times. If you're doing it 1,000,000 times, that's one thing. But if you're only doing a couple thousand times, it's not that big of a deal. And as far as advice going out there to do stuff, I would tell people the easy stuff is picked over. And consulting, and y'all been on your own, working for yourself is a lot harder than people really realize. And with all the M&A, there's a lot of consultants hitting the market right now. I hit the market in COVID and did consulting too, and it was miserable. We kept the lights on and stuff, but that was also, went through divorce, and all this other stuff, right? Life just happens, right? It's tough to do that stuff, keep the lights on. I think, if you're going to do that sort of thing, there's riches in the niches, right? It's find one thing that you're really good at and just really, really focus on it. I think for us, it's been this kind of picking up old data sets. I hadn't found the riches in it yet, but we did find a niche, right? And so, it's, yeah. And so it's kind of, it's interesting from that regard because, we do this more than anybody, but, find one thing that you're really good at, because there's a ton of generalists out there, right? Especially in the age of shale. A lot of people have done the same job for the last 10 or 15 years, and the job market is just getting smaller. Find something you're good at, focus on it, and stay focused on it. And I think I wish I'd known beforehand, because we just threw 1,000,000 things at the dartboard and saw what stuck, see what stuck. But which you have to do in the beginning, but at the same time, you can waste a lot of time and a lot of money very, very quickly doing that sort of thing too. So,
oh yeah,
being on your own is fun, but man, it's a grind too. It's not nearly as easy or as fun as I think a lot of what you see on TV. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can see you sitting there thinking about
contemplating my own life decisions over here.
The flashbacks.
That's a really good way to put it, Bryan.
Yeah. We call it the Sabata 3-2. Not two. The old thing is 2 steps forward and 1 step back. We say it's more like 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. Right? You're making progress, but it's not quite 50% every time.
Right.
So.
Right.
Well, Bryan, this has been so interesting. I love that we've gotten to sit down and chat with you. Where can people find out more if they want to get in touch with you?
So honestly, the best place is LinkedIn. Pretty active on there. I'm constantly posting and usually spamming people's feed with just pictures of warehouses and Penske trucks and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It's kind of, I don't know. Geologists I think most geologists were all hoarders, and I have a lot of people come up to me. It's like, man, I wish I was doing what you're doing. It's like, yeah, I mean, it looks really cool, but it's, also spend a lot of 100-degree days in a dusty warehouse in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best. We're releasing a new website. Actually, went out a couple weeks ago. We're still debugging it. So just sabata.com. So we're pretty, we're not very flashy. We kind of just focus on the work. And then I go to a lot of the conferences and stuff too. So obviously Saga Wisdom, we'll be over at Sofa Becker, and we're at most of the big geology conferences, a lot of the regional ones as well too. So SB stuff as well too. So yeah, just I don't know, just all over the place. But LinkedIn's definitely the easiest one. Even my partners don't know where I'm at half the time. So I've moved Oh, go ahead.
My final question is: what's your favorite fossil that you own or that you found?
Oh, probably ammonites. That's actually, it's like the little. I don't have any in here.
Do you have one?
Front. Yeah, I do, but I don't have them in here.
That's okay.
It's going to be like the little swirly shells. That's actually where all this started. My PhD work was working on all these sandstones out in western Colorado, but it's really hard to keep track of them. Well, there was some old work done by the USGS that tied individual species to these different sandstones, and that's actually what started all of this whole journey.
It was a little ammonite.
Yeah, exactly. From a buddy of mine named Mark Kirschbaum over at the USGS, show you a bunch of this stuff. And so anyways, we kind of built the company to handle fossils and well logs. And by being able to handle both those things, you can kind of handle everything, to be honest, because they're so terribly different, right? So that's cool. Probably the really the foundational, kind of wild to think about it, but yeah.
But it is. Well, I love that. Thank you so much, Bryan. I appreciate all of your time today.
Thanks, Bryan.
Yeah, thank y'all. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Remember to subscribe, and we will see you next time on Power Play.
Keep it shaly. We'll see you.
Thanks for listening to OGGN, the world's largest and most listened to podcast network for the oil and energy industry. If you like this show, leave us a review and then go to OGGN.com to learn about all our other shows. And don't forget to sign up for our weekly newsletter. This show has been a production of the Oil and Gas Global Network.